Um, you have some panelists missing, no? Okay, here she is. Could you please be seated? We are going to start.
Good look.
We are going to start the session on the capacity development tools. Everybody has been mentioning the importance of capacity development in relation to the other tools, but I'm sure there is still something new to be said. Kees, you are the responsible for one of the most important capacity development programs in the UN, so CAPNet. So go ahead, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Josefina. And it's good to hear that you find us very important. I was just thinking, the last session on the last day of a long conference, and who is left to talk about capacity development, It reminds me maybe of the old days when you would have investment projects, and as a little add-on, there would be something called capacity building, But it's good to see you still here at the end of this conference, like I said, and at the end of a very long day. I hope you still have the spirit to participate with us in a discussion on capacity development. And these old days, or as a kind of last-minute add-on, have long been gone. Capacity development, I think, have gained a lot of interest, basically worldwide. And we can see it in our programs and in our how we are being approached. And also, during these last couple of days, and also today in all the sessions, capacity development has been mentioned at least once by every presenter or any summary or anything that has been said today. So I think that says a bit about the importance of the subject. And like I said, I'm very happy that we still have some people left to exchange on this subject with us. Of course, we have an excellent panel, and I would just ask them to introduce themselves very briefly. My name is Kees Lenissen, and as Josefina said, I work with CAPNet. It's a UNDP program, International Network for Capacity Development in Sustainable Water Management. We've been doing this for the last 12, 13 years already. We have basically built a kind of a global network consisting of regional and country-level capacity development networks that consist of capacity development institutions, like universities, NGOs, but also government. And it's like I said, it's a global program, 23, 24 of those networks working with us. And we think that we're making quite some noise for such a small program as we are. We have a small secretariat sitting in Rio de Janeiro. We are only 6 people. But of course, the outreach and the impact that we have is because of all the partners and the partner networks that we work with, like in the Philippines and in many other locations. Okay, that about myself. I will just go around the table, pass the microphone. Alice?
Well, good afternoon. Buenas tardes. I'm Alice Baumann. I'm the honorary founding president of the Women for Water Partnership and the vice chair of the Global Water Partnership. And I'm here now to report on the very extensive and rich and diverse deliberation of the civil societies.
Good afternoon. My name is Selesi Wakala. I come from UNDESA as working there as interregional advisor in capacity development for national strategies of sustainable development goals. Professionally, I'm from the water sector, water resource engineer. I worked in the past in African Climate Policy Center looking at water and the climate change issues, in International Water Management Institute looking at research in Africa related to water resource management. I also worked in university teaching water courses, also served as a dean of water specialized institute.
Thank you. Good afternoon, buenas tardes. My name is Kate Lamb. I'm here, I work for CDP. I'm the head of CDP's water programme. Please don't worry if you've never heard of CDP. You're not alone. We were recently branded in the Harvard Business Review as the most influential green NGO that you've probably never heard of. My ambition today is that when you leave, you'll know a little bit more about us. Our mission is to change the way the world does business and to catalyse action towards a more sustainable economy. We leverage investor power to motivate corporations to consider and own and take ownership of the impacts that they're having on environmental issues and take action to mitigate those in a very sustainable manner. My programme aims to promote corporate water stewardship, and we believe that that is clearly the emerging philosophy that's being adopted by many corporations that we believe will help to enhance water security for all.
Good afternoon. I'm Saruntuia Andrea from UNESCO Division of Water Sciences, and a brief introduction about UNESCO. Well, you know, UNESCO is the main UN organization with regard to promoting water sciences, capacity building, and education, and within the UN water system. And UNESCO's water family is very large, and it includes the UNESCO's International Hydrological Program, which is an intergovernmental scientific program to promote water sciences, and it's based at the Division of Water Sciences in Paris in UNESCO. We have also an important institution promoting water education, UNESCO Institute for Water Education in Delft in Netherlands. And we also have a large network of water centers in 25 countries in different regions of the world, and we have our 30 water chairs hosted in different universities around the world. So we have very strong network in water research, science, capacity building. So with Josephine and her team, we collaborated in this UN Water Zaragoza conference in convening the academia sessions together with participating universities and colleagues from UNICEF. And we have had very rich day of academia sessions where the scientists actually discussed how they can make a role in the implementation of the SDGs, and I will share the recommendations later. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. And at the end of this session, we will have a short reflection on what has been said by Joachim Harlin, my UNDP colleague sitting there. So I will call him after the session to give his final thoughts on the topic. All right, thank you for agreeing with that. We don't have so much time left. So what I would like to do is that we do the short introduction, the short presentations, the feedback from the stakeholder meetings yesterday to plenary, and then immediately after each presentation, I would allow for some minutes for question and answering. So instead of waiting waiting for 4 presentations and then forget about the question that you had with the first presenter, I would rather do it now after each presentation. Also try to save a bit of time there. So without much further ado, then I would like to pass you on back to Celeste to say something about the session on governments.
Okay, thank you very much, Kees. Capacity development is a key cross-cutting theme. In the government session, we discussed in depth on a number of issues related to water scarcity, human rights, water supply and sanitation, risk issues, and water quality. In all areas, capacity development was prominent, but also if we look back to the Rio process and so on, 70 country studies made by UNDP and UNDP shows that implementation capacity in the MDG as well as past sustainable development agenda is a key. Therefore, really investment need to be done on capacity development. So when you say capacity development, it goes into policy planning, strategies and the programs, looking at governance and institutional capacity development, capacity related to mobilizing finance, technology, and developing infrastructure, looking at also human resource capacity. So looking at the challenges in this 4, target-related SDG water-related area. Water scarcity, for example, on its own is a key challenge due to what we call economic scarcity in some region because of physical scarcity. The governance capacity deficit, such as regulatory capacity, having agreements, laws, and enforcement, as well as lack of essential institutions, are some of the capacity gaps observed in the case studies. Capacity of resource availability and the mismatch with the demand, as well as economic development, is an infrastructure capacity gap, and also capacity to collect relevant data and information system were looked at when we looked at the water scarcity issue. Particularly, example from Myanmar was emphasized in terms of capacity development issues. Despite Myanmar having significant water resources, there is a capacity challenge in terms of creating economic water. That means overcoming economic water scarcity capacity gap, and also institutional mechanism. So I'll talk later on a little bit on how they overcome the challenge. But also in the issues of risk and issues of scarcity, and excellent examples were presented in pertinence to capacity from Spain on Segura River Basin, how they have developed integrated resource management to overcome scarcity, and in areas of technology use, information management, and in boosting up actually the physical availability of water. Mexico's case is an excellent one also in developing financial capacity through government mechanisms, how they have put together innovative financing to curb water scarcity issues. Brazil case study also shows enabling institutions for preserving water resource through capacity development and people empowerment was key. Challenges on human rights to water and sanitation. Again, limited capacity for development and maintenance of water and sanitation services, especially in developing country, was found as a key challenge. Limited skilled human resource to operate and maintain the system, and also in conditions of small revenue-based and limited capacity for development and maintenance of water and sanitation service are major challenges confronting water and sanitation service providers, especially in small towns of developing countries. So in this case, we looked at a specific case on capacity development from government side, the case of Nigeria, the Girls and Women program. The basic challenge is that the service provision based on public financing mechanism to develop projects, operate and maintain was not working. Therefore, they followed some innovative approach in overcoming this challenge. So I'll talk again on that. On the context of risk management in the river basin, water-related disasters obviously is the most prominent cause of disaster in the world. It is pinpointed that the last couple of few years, 90% of the disasters in the world are related to water. Therefore, this is a key challenge on its own, but also a challenge to be addressed by government is in creating capacity through awareness creation, increasing adaptation capacity, also creating that resilience of the system, including infrastructure, human resource awareness, and so on and so forth. Specific case study was not as such pinpointed, but a lot of critical examples related to this risk from Dutch experience and how capacity was developed through a trigger that was happened in 1953, and also the Danube integrated flood and river basin management through developing integrated modeling capacity and communication between nations, cooperation-based capacity for flood risk reduction in Itaipu, monitoring and evaluation system capacity in the North Africa and Arab region for data collection and standardization were presented. With respect to the water quality challenge, the key challenge in the water quality aspect of water management is actually it has received very little attention in the past. So consequently, in many places that action should start from a very basic low base and therefore very low capacity in terms of understanding how to do it, having the relevant instrument and infrastructure facility to collect information and monitor water quality issues. So government's key role is to develop capacity in all aspects, including data collection, information management, developing human skills, creating awareness, creating relevant governance and institutional mechanism. Case study of Brazil, where from the situation of polluting river from untreated sewage system, discharging toxic materials and water quality monitoring deficits were identified as capacity gaps. But also interesting cases were also presented from Korea, Spain's awareness and capacity gaps, particularly how they have established so-called mayor's school and developed guidebooks. And also WIPO Green as capacity enhancing innovative solution for those lacking capacity through creating this interactive marketplace that connects technology with service providers to where it is needed. So looking at, quite briefly, it's very difficult to bring in this short period of time, sorry. I'm sorry. Short period of time, what has been discussed throughout the day, which is a very rich discussion on capacity development. But just to pinpoint some of this, capacity development is a collective effort. It's only possible within a shared effort to improve information system, communication tools, and public stakeholder participation. And learning by doing is crucial. When you look at water scarcity issues, stakeholder engagement was pinpointed as key, which enabled to overcome the economic and institutional capacity gaps. In Myanmar, creations of 3 pillars of capacity with respect to advisory, secretariat, and the decision support tools help to move. Specific interventions cover like establishing graduate programs, MSc and PhD, including sending young professionals in abroad to acquire their advanced degrees. Short-term program, frequent workshop and advanced technology project, communication and modern subjects on modern subjects, active community engagement, creating also national water partnerships that is facilitated through global water partnership and so on has helped Myanmar to move forward. On water supply and sanitation issues, subsidy-based water supply and sanitation in Nigeria, as I've said, was not successful. In fact, Nigeria has got very significant number of population without access to improved water as well as sanitation facilities. About 50 million people are not having access to improved water, and about 90 million do not have also improved sanitation facility. Nigeria is the most populous country in Africa with 170 million people. So the GWIM project result actually is tried in 4 pilot cases in 4 districts where women actually are organized and put at the forefront for managing the water facilities. They were capacitated. Therefore, the conclusion is that women are better operators of water facility, can organize themselves much better, can pay attention to maintain maintenance and other requirements in time. And actually, this is an experience to be replicated elsewhere in other 32 districts. With regard to risk management in river basins, obviously risk reduction requires building capacity and requires long-term actions in water resource management, also infrastructure capacity, mobilizing the necessary resource. So modeling capacity tools used in the Danube, or high-quality data and information capacity for monitoring and evaluation like in the North Africa, or global framework like Hyogo framework are examples of capacity development tools for risk management. And with respect to water quality and the government roles, Brazil's example provides the creation of national water quality evaluation program and the implementation of monitoring networks in accordance with national water quality monitoring network, but also other important tools like JMOTOR, GEMSTAT, and Aquastat actually were referred as important tools to be utilized to develop capacity. Okay, a lot have been also said in terms of obstacles. I'll just say a few words on those. Lack of integration, that means bringing sustainable development into the center stage of development. Lack of engagement or inclusiveness, limited capacity at grassroots level for uptake and implementation of projects, and limited investment in data and information are obstacles that are observed. So in looking at conditions for success, obviously I've said some of them. Awareness creation and sensitization is key. Once communities understand the value of water protection, for example, they become willing to adopt technologies to protect their water resources. Improving individual and institutional capacity is crucial. Obviously, as I've said, capacity building is a cross-cutting issue, so all-round capacity development is necessary. And finally, the roles of government is basically governments are providers of policy, therefore developing capacity to create enabling policy, legal and institutional framework is crucial. Creating capacity through awareness creation, creating right environment even for capacity development itself and innovations to happen is crucial. Providing also adequate financing budget, mobilizing resource for capacity development is key role for government. And government should not be simply picking also technology, but provide framework and practice information and innovation systems, standard financing structure, etc., that supports overall capacity development. I know it is under service to sum up within 10 minutes the whole day discussion, but I think these are the key areas we have discussed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Celestine. No, it was really very comprehensive. And I have a question myself. You mentioned many different types of capacities that are needed and that need to be developed. What would you, in 3 words, what would be your main tools and instruments that you would use to develop these capacities?
The main tools is actually what you want to solve, which aspect of capacity you would like to solve. Is it capacity with respect to developing policy, strategy, and the program? Therefore, you have to focus on those kind of capacity development for policymakers, technicians, and relevant stakeholders. If you are looking at developing financial capacities, then you have to look into clear budget allocation for the respective area, and also create innovative financing mechanism. If you are looking at capacity in terms of creating data and information system, then you have to invest on actual data collection and utilize also the existing tools which may be developed in, through advanced research institution or developed country or innovative way even in emerging economies, then utilize those and adapt within the country context. So it depends on which aspect you're looking for.
Thank you very much. Now you mentioned quite some examples also on this subject. Any questions from Celeste here in the room? Or are we all too tired now? It looks like it. All right, let me just... oh, there's been...
Hello. Yeah. Perhaps it's more a comment than a question that after reviewing different capacity development approaches in different, for instance, in Latin America, lessons learned from this part of the world comes that capacity development is more focused on outputs, unfortunately. And for instance, even a policy should be considered as a output if it's not implemented. So sometimes policies, manuals, and others are just outputs, and perhaps we should focus on outcomes regarding capacity development. So I would like to know your opinion on this. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely we have to focus on outcomes and creating the necessary impacts. When we talk about capacity development for implementation, it means that we have the end results that communities have got access to water and sanitation, not the process, but capacity development is therefore a means to reach to that end, to that outcome of providing access to water to a community or urban areas, wherever you are concerned with. Definitely we have to focus on outcome. We have to define the impact pathway and outcome mapping while we design the capacity development strategy.
All right. I can add something from the CapNet point of view. We have developed something which is called the MELP. You can find it on our website, the Monitoring and Evaluation Learning Plan. And it has outcome and results measuring as well as impact assessment type of activities, so that we can basically measure or assess also the longer term impact that we will have with our capacity development activities. And of course, in the intention is that these impacts, that they meet the expectations that you have when you start your capacity development activity. It's on the CapNet site, so you can just have a look at it. Any other question? All right. No? Then I happily move you to Alice for the next presentation.
I thank very much the gentleman from the audience for focusing on outcome, and I think that is a very good introduction for the way that civil society approached capacity reinforcement. We didn't call it capacity development because capacity development means that there's no capacity there. We in the civil society pillar had 4 of the 9 major groups of Agenda 21: women, youth, indigenous people, and the large community of different NGOs from all corners of the world. So I hope that I have sufficient capacity to adequately summarize what has been there. But in order to do that, I will not talk freely. I will mostly read so that I do not get carried away and I just report, which is my function today. So we had a few general points. And the first general point is driving local action through civil society involvement was perceived as a great opportunity, if not the greatest opportunity, to achieve the SDGs and the universal water goal. And the importance of local ownership was stressed time and again from all the angles that we saw. But there was this but: being driven locally does not mean working in isolation. An essential part of capacitating local action is to build the network and connections to reinforce and support them, and to enable those local actors to work in partnership with and connect to the national or even international level. So we focused very much on these local drivers for action, because the low-hanging fruits have already been picked. I mean, we addressed the large infrastructure things, but doing it decentralized in all those different communities, this is a challenge I can envisage. But I was going to read, not talk. Yeah. Local actors should work in cooperation with external actors, whereby external actors should avoid to impose their solutions. Working demand-driven through partnerships is the most effective and sustainable way to capacitate local actors, and this will contribute substantially to achieving the human rights to water and sanitation. This has been a very strong message from all the NGO participants. Now, the second general comment is that capacity development is about empowering people to take action. The term capacity development, capacity building, gives the impression that there is no capacity at present. But that is often not the case. In French, the term renforcement, to strengthen capacity, which gives due consideration to local knowledge and approaches that reflect local conditions. So to reiterate the words of Jean Bosco Dazier in today's conference daily, to reinforce local capacity, we should reinforce without replacing, support without crushing, and change without substituting. The third point was that when it comes to achieving universal access and sustainable water governance, it's not so much about capacitating individuals, but capacitating the communities. And this, it has been mentioned before by several people, it is a process that takes time and that takes an integrated approach that goes with the dynamics of the community and has to fall within their social-cultural context. So we have to respect, first, that local communities have a different time perception. So you cannot just say that it has to be done in 5 minutes if that is not the way the community works. That they have different cultures, that the rhythm and dynamics of the community are something that drive the way you successfully capacitate them. And also that this community is not homogeneous, that it is diverse, as we all are. So tailor-made approaches are very much needed. Strengthening the capacity of local actors, be it civil society actors or local governments, is not a one-time thing. It is an ongoing process. Especially in places where officials are replaced regularly, it needs revisiting all the time, slowly building a community of practice. And it is a package, including technology, skills, information and knowledge, and most important, particularly in the case of marginalized groups, building the confidence to speak and to act. A combination of soft and hard skills. So these were the general sort of like things that were coming from all these capacity development knowledge and expertise. Addressing the questions that had been put before us, the first question was what implementing challenges are addressed by the different capacity development and social instruments. Well, the main challenge is financial. Current funding systems do not give due consideration to social empowerment and to capacity strengthening to address the local needs and to work within the local context. The decentralization that is required when working in rural areas and under high variable local circumstances in different cultures is a major challenge. Tailor-made approaches are needed, and the process of coaching and support, not a one-time training, for instance, so that it sinks in and evokes lasting change. And the third point for challenges, major challenges, was bringing it to scale. Because it is a package, a holistic approach, including these technology skills, knowledge, information, mindset change, confidence, cultural sensitivity, a combination of the hard and the soft. That is the domain very often of different institutions and capacity building organizations. And there was this one case of South-South cooperation by ILO where they said, yes, but the capacity to cooperate as different institutions has to be built as well. So that adds to the process before even entering into capacity development. The main points. Then implementing a challenge. What implementation challenges are addressed by the different capacity development and social instruments? The second question. What am I doing? Am I repeating myself? The main challenge is financial. No, I have had that. Moving to the 3. You see, that happens when you have to read and you're not into it. I'm so sorry. I'm already at point 3. What are the examples presented in the conference on capacity development and tools to be used to contribute effectively to the implementation? Again, we have 4 major points. The first one is civil society itself is a tool for capacitating local communities to implement water-related targets. A very strong example of that was the role of women civil society in turning around the mindset of an entire community in Mauritania and Tanzania, Tegemeo Women Group. The process of building and strengthening the group, overcoming traditional gender stereotypes, building the confidence and the space to have a voice in decision-making was showcased, and you can find it all on the website, so I'm not going to go into that. The second point was the absolute necessity of seed funds for those civil society actors who do not have cash, live in an exchange economy, etc., and the positive spin-off of having seed money to catalyze action. This was demonstrated, amongst others, through the capacitating through funding tool that the Women Fund in Tanzania has developed, and it's also there on the website. I already mentioned the South-South cooperation in development of river basin governance, involving local community actors from the beginning, in the design as well as the implementation. Again, a process whereby due attention was given to facilitating community representatives to be a partner, an equal partner in decision-making in their own river basin. And I have to stress that we have had several of those examples, so it's not fair to mention only one, but that was the one that sprang to mind. And each time it comes back that it's tailor-made approaches that to involve the community, taking into account what is the local circumstance. And then once you have this pilot done, then it's easier to upscale. But it's still labor-intensive, time-intensive, and needs some resources. So I already addressed the last tool. Each organization has its own tools. There are common denominators. So that's really what we found. Although it was so diverse that the common denominators are still there, and I try to summarize them. It's the long-term involvement, the identification and reinforcement of local leadership, building a peer group around motivators, actors like those leaders, access to networks, we have said that before, access to information that is understandable for the community, good planning and budgeting, responding to the demands of the groups, and having available a selection of technologies and approaches that the community can choose from to reinforce their capacity. It's not us telling them supply-driven what is good for them, but this is what is out there and this is what you can use. And there was, and COST was a nice example of having all those community-based tools available, and the community can then choose what really suits them. Now, the next question was, what are some of the obstacles you have diagnosed when implementing the different capacity development tools? Let me see. Oh, lack of integration. In terms of capacitating the different stakeholders, local authorities, for instance, are a key party next to the local civil society groups, water user associations, and what have you. But integration also refers to the external actors that really need to enforce the capacity of the local communities and to implement. They have different approaches and cultures, and it takes time and understanding to really communicate. And you cannot take in a message if you don't understand it properly. So that is, again, a sort of appeal to allow for time. Financing. Definitely financing. In particular for empowerment, which is a soft skill and not very often understood as an added value of service provision by those who divide the money. So I second the appeal to invest and budget for capacity development. And then the last obstacle, the time frame of project funding and hence of the project itself. Capacity strengthening takes time, we have heard that several times, and effort over a prolonged period of time, and it's an ongoing process during implementation. because often in a progress implementation, the roles of different actors change, and they face new challenges and still have to be capacitated to take on those challenges. The conditions for success and to replicate. Adequate financing for empowerment of local actors because they will replicate. Understanding the value of investing in capacity reinforcement, true understanding of culture and local ownership. And the last one was the role of our stakeholder group in overcoming the obstacles of implementation. As I said, civil society is not one stakeholder group. We are the civil societies. And I refer to the civil society concept note if you want to read more about it. But to understand the real challenges of civil society, of the society as a whole, you should involve civil society in the capacity development because they will accelerate the process for you. And partnerships is key in overcoming our obstacles. So that's partnerships we also perceived as a tool. My key messages for later?
Yeah, we'll come back to that.
We will come back to that. Then this was basically what I tried to sum up from this very rich discussion.
Thank you. What becomes very clear after these first two presentations is that we definitely need to strengthen our capacities in fundraising. I mean, that is really, we have with all the different types of capacities needed, for which we need different programs. And you mentioned tailor-made programs at different levels for different groups. Yeah, we just need to raise the funds. Any questions? Up there?
I'll just briefly make a comment to your last point, is raising the funds is one of the things as a sector, when we look at the total funding that goes towards capacity development, it's 1% of total funding. Yeah. And so that's something that I believe needs to be raised, that if time and time again, the fingers pointed on we need to build human capability, then that has to change.
No, I totally agree with what you're saying. That's the obviously. But like I mentioned in the beginning, capacity development is really a key, has become a key point, also in people's thinking. But unfortunately, it doesn't come with the budgets, that are required so far.
Well, I don't know whether this was addressed really in the financing tool because I had to step out. But one of the things that came out of our civil society discussions on financing very clearly was that in each budget there should be an adequate allocation of financing for capacity development because it pays off. I mean, every business community knows that you have to invest and that, let's say, the results come after the investment. I don't know how you say that in English, but everybody knows that, but pre-investing in human capital apparently is not done because they don't see it as bringing revenue. But we can assure you it brings big revenue. And the percentage, indeed, is less than 1%. And then that capacity development usually goes not to the groundwork that civil society does, but, for instance, to capacitate civil engineers or whatever. So really that is the key point, and we have to turn to the governments, so that in their budget, and I want to only make one comment because if you look at the handbook for the implementation of the human rights to water and sanitation, there is a whole chapter on participation, which is one of the key principles of the human rights-based approach, and it's detailed there. What are the impediments? What the barriers to participation? Finance is there very prominently. Then I went to the chapter for the governments on budget and finance. If you analyze the chapter of the handbook on budget and finance, the only thing that is said about participation is the right to participate in the budget process. There is no mention of budgeting for all the things that were in the previous chapter. Right. If you include that in your water resources budgeting, there would be a big change for the whole efficiency of the work. And we would no longer have that, as the audit of the EU said in 2012 of water and sanitation projects in sub-Saharan Africa, that more than 50% did not reach the beneficiaries. So if I would have had my hands on that money for OU for capacitating, yes, we could have made a change.
Definitely. Thank you very much. Any other question or comment?
on investing or pre-investing in the capacity building, and it will make sure the revenue. Of course, I do agree with Alice, but our practical problem is not having the continuum of or in other words, the time scale. Because the government is talking about 5 years, and the last year they are busy with the election. So how do we convince that, kind of short-lived authorities to come up with, long-term benefit? Because the one who has to invest is them, and the one who will yield the crop is others.
Very good point. Thank you very much. Okay, I would like to move on to Kate, representing the business stakeholders group.
Great.
And if you could report what has been said there on capacity development.
Yes, sure. So I'm obviously not from business. CDP, as I mentioned earlier, is a not-for-profit organisation. However, in the last few years, we engage on an annual basis with around about 4,000 companies who now use our platform to provide information to around about 570 institutional investors. So I hope that sort of gives me a little bit of a qualification for providing this information to you today. I wanted to start, first of all, by thanking all of the participants in the session yesterday, particularly my panel members. And I hope I do them justice in my notes, but feel free, anybody in the room, if I miss anything, to add it in. So there is growing awareness amongst the business community of the importance of sound water resources management in supporting their ability to operate, buy and sell. Further, there is an increasing recognition that the real value of water is not adequately reflected in the price that they pay, but instead resides in business continuity, supply chain resilience, and importantly, and often crucially, in their social and legal license to operate. On this latter point, we found out yesterday it's not only the water users, but also the water suppliers that are coming under increasing scrutiny, and they're becoming increasingly expected to justify and demonstrate their roles in water resources management within the communities that they operate in, buy from, or sell to. While awareness is increasing, particularly amongst larger businesses, existing and new capacity, as well as an accountability frameworks, are needed in order to ensure a robust and meaningful response. There is some way to go, particularly within the SME community. It was anticipated, however, by participants that as big business leads, there will be a trickle-down effect through their supply chains that will ultimately enhance and influence the rest of the market. A range of tools were presented to enable this change to take place, and while some were very focused with regards to specific water-related SDGs, such as the CEO Water Mandate's guidance for companies on respecting the human rights to water and sanitation, which was launched during the conference, there was an overriding approach that was championed by almost all participants in the panel that was felt to hold the strongest and the greatest potential to not only strengthen and build capacity within the business community themselves, but to also prompt and catalyse action within the business community so that they play their role in building the capacity amongst other key stakeholders involved in water resources management and contribute to the achievement of the SDGs. This is corporate water stewardship. You've heard about this already from Michael, and I'll be reflecting upon that again later. Some highlights of the projects that were covered. Of course, I'm going to start with my own, which was work underway by CDP. As I mentioned at the beginning, we use the power of transparency, reporting in the public domain, and public benchmarking of corporate disclosures to catalyse, monitor and maintain water stewardship amongst 3,000 of the world's largest water users. We provide a global voluntary accountability framework at scale. Some of the outcomes that have been achieved to date include a 318% increase in investor use of meaningful corporate water data to facilitate better decision-making. I mentioned earlier the questionnaire was issued this year on behalf of 570 investors with around $60 trillion worth of assets. They're going beyond using solely global total volumes of water consumed per company to better understanding, are those companies engaging at the river basin level? Are they engaging with civil societies and communities? And if not, why not? It's a crucial shift in philosophy for this audience. We've seen a 25% increase in the number of companies engaging and building water stewardship capacity within their supply chains. We've had a 10% increase in the number of corporate boards that are now have responsibility for water and water management in general. And quite excitingly, within the companies that have disclosed to us in 2014, there's over $31 billion worth of planned corporate spend on water risk mitigation activities that have been disclosed to us. The potential is clearly huge to drive and understand where that investment is going so that it meets our objectives and supports the achievement of the SDGs. In addition to the clearly wonderful work that we're doing at CDP, this is also supported, strengthened, and enriched by our colleagues at WRI, WWF, WBCSD, and others to build and develop. They're building and developing open data platforms, such as the WRI's Aqueduct, to facilitate meaningful water risk assessments that go beyond the factory fence line and consider social, environmental, and other hydrological issues. This is really the fundamental baseline of making informed decisions and taking the right actions for many companies. So those open data platforms are really critical in informing that process. Work by the CEO Water Mandate, including the guide, obviously, that we mentioned earlier, as well as WBCSD's WASH in the Workplace Pledge, to promote and support companies in their journeys to respect and support the human right to water and sanitation. We also heard about the work from the International Council for Metals and Mining, who are developing practical guidance for catchment-based water management for the sector that builds on this already sound base of knowledge from within the NGO community. In addition, you've already heard from Michael about the work underway at the European Water Partnership, as well as the Alliance for Water Stewardship, developing their international standard that facilitates an informed action by companies. We believed, and one of the outcomes from yesterday was that businesses, given the right tools and incentives, can really deliver solutions, and importantly, they can deliver those solutions at scale. This will take a little time, however, perhaps not as long as we might anticipate. Confidence was gained, I think, when we heard about the experience of Nestlé, who are engaging 50,000 of their coffee growers in Vietnam in order to build sustainable agricultural capacity that ensures not only the resiliency of supply for Nestlé, which is obviously one of their main motivators and drivers for taking this action, but that will also contribute at a very large scale to improvements in water quality and quantity issues within key regions of the country. So what are some of the obstacles that we've identified? In many cases, water has been managed by businesses at a very operational level in the past. In order to enhance the role of business in contributing to the SDGs, water management must be viewed as a strategic priority and must move from management to stewardship, as Michael eloquently put it earlier, from CSR, away from CSR, into core business functions. CDP rewards companies who are actually undertaking these steps through our scoring and ranking process. This is really, however, a philosophical shift for many businesses, many of whom are still grappling to make the business case based upon price and return on investment. We know it's really very difficult to use that argument. As a result, the perception of water problems within business has led to fragmented, uncoordinated responses that need to be replaced with integral, coordinated and planned responses, and that business case needs to be strengthened. As a solution, CDP and the role of transparency on key corporate water data points, such as the potential business value at risk within each river basin. This is a data point that we now request every company to disclose to us. It may appear to be very simple, but the behaviour that request inspires is really quite fundamental. What it does is sparks a conversation between water managers and the finance team. Getting that data point and then communicating that back to the director of finance and then ultimately to the board will help enhance the importance of river basin management at the points within a business that it's so clearly necessary to make. Similarly, many sectors are struggling with negative legacies and the mistrust that has been allowed to settle. This must be overcome through transparency, ownership, communication, and commitments. And the metals and mining sector and those involved yesterday very much were embracing this. It's important, ultimately, in order to build confidence amongst all actors, but particularly between business, civil societies, and government. Sort of like Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, the first stage to recovery is admitting you've got a problem. And we see many businesses are coming to the table and doing that now. It's really critical to move the agenda forward. And in fact, AGWA, who were facilitating some of the discussions, reflected on the fact that a solution to this may actually lie in the development of peer-to-peer knowledge transfers, ambassadors between business sectors, and translators between sectors, such as academics, civil societies, and businesses. As we already heard today, there are a number of systemic barriers that need to be overcome. The work that we're undertaking with sustainable stock exchanges is one way in which we hope to address those systemic barriers. There are misconceptions and miscommunications that are leading to missed opportunities. For example, some overriding concerns amongst many businesses that adopting a public commitment in respecting the human right to water and sanitation may in some way harm their business by exposing them to greater liabilities. In addition, many businesses view the issue as something additional rather than actually something that can be achieved as part of their overall efforts to reduce their environmental impacts, such as effective reductions in pollution of industrial effluent. We've already heard, so I won't go over again, about the lack of capacity in particular subnational levels, but these are recognised increasingly by businesses as a threat to their business. Which, again, while it's a threat to the business, it opens up an opportunity to really address that. An example is one of the drinks company Diageo, who have established a collaborative effort in Nairobi involving government, local industry, and NGOs to identify and implement solutions to water scarcity that have the very real potential, ultimately, to either to limit or enhance the growth, both for Diageo, but fundamentally for Nairobi and the communities that live there. Finally, many businesses realise that they don't have the internal capacity necessary for effective stakeholder engagement within these river basins, and so we're anticipating seeing more of these initiatives take place. It is becoming a pre-competitive subject, however. We're seeing partnerships being created between companies that were once incredibly adversarial. It's important, however, to note that we can't be naive in thinking that competition is going to disappear over water issues. Coca-Cola will always want to beat Pepsi, and vice versa.
Quite an understatement.
So once a business understands the value of water protection, they become willing to adopt approaches that will, in order to protect water resources. Improving business capacity and also leveraging the scale at which big business itself can then also improve capacity will be key in achieving the post-2015 development agenda and reducing water-related risks for all. Capacity building is a cross-cutting issue. It involves building abilities to apply, adapt existing technologies, to innovate, financial capacity building, and institutional capacities, and so on. We've already heard. We believe, and one of the outcomes from yesterday was the transparency, water stewardship, collective action, training, data, information, learning by doing, and monitoring systems are all means to enhance capabilities and capacity of all kinds. Finally, a proper culture of sharing within and between various stakeholders in the water community, including business, will make an important step in building trust, enhancing confidence, and delivering value for all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. There was a lot of information.
Sorry.
My name is Kees. I have a water problem. Hello, Kate. Well, I was very pleased that you mentioned also the small and medium-sized enterprises. Because often when we talk about business and in the water sector, we talk about these large operators or the multinationals that you also mentioned, but there's very little attention for the small operators. The individual water truck bringing water to a slum or to a community or in the rural areas. So it's good that we also have a bit of attention for that type of private sector operators. Any questions for Kate? I see two. 1, 2.
Now, a lot of investors screen a lot of companies in order to carbon performance. No? And what do you think? The water performance of big companies will be a key point about the investor next year, 2 years later?
It already is. I'm very excited to say. And we've got numerous examples of positive investor pressure where they are considering the water implications and water performance, if you like, of the portfolio companies within which they operate. As I mentioned, the growing number of investor signatories that use our programme is a reflection on the level of awareness of water, of how serious water scarcity is, water insecurity is to the performance of portfolio companies. There are numerous examples of companies that have lost their social license to operate. There's one particular company that have invested $8.5 million in a mine development, but then had the mine development was shelved. And so there's a loss of value there, not to mention the future potential earnings, and investors are incredibly concerned about that issue. Some key examples. This year we have, 2014, Boston Consulting Group wrote, Boston Common Consulting, Boston Common Asset Management, not consulting, wrote letters to 21 chairmen of their persistent non-disclosing companies, so those companies that every year have decided not to participate in our process, strongly suggesting and requesting them to disclose to us. Norges Bank Investment Management, they're the Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund. They're the key supporters and sponsors of our programme. With ICCR, it's an interfaith council on corporate responsibility based in the US, a big group of investors that have come together. They, again, are proactively engaging their portfolio companies, requesting them not only to disclose, but then also to demonstrate improvements in the way in which they are mitigating and managing water-related risks. We're not at the point, and we don't necessarily advocate investors divesting from companies. We don't feel that it's appropriate at this stage. There's much greater value to be gained by staying, investing, and engaging those companies to support them in their transition towards better corporate water stewardship. We anticipate that as our database grows, we now have the world's largest database of corporate water data. We will be loading certain elements onto Bloomberg terminals and Google Finance. Our carbon data is already loaded onto there, and it's actually the carbon data points from CDP are downloaded on average 1 million times every 6 weeks. We do hope and anticipate that this will be exactly the same scenario with our water data. And one final point, WRI, Paul has unfortunately had to leave. They've actually loaded the aqueduct risk maps onto the Bloomberg terminals, and they're used by almost every institutional investor who are trying to develop a better understanding of water-related risks and how it might affect their ability for their portfolio companies to generate the returns that they're anticipated. So there is already investor action, and we believe that there will be more to come.
Thank you very much. In the meantime, Alice, you had a question related to this?
Yes, I have a question to bridge government with business. It sprang to mind when you talked about the database and accountability mechanisms that in countries like, for instance, Uganda and India, they have a law that when a company gets a license to operate, they cannot pollute the environment. I mean, it's a bit simply said. Of course, enforcing those laws are quite another story. But do you know anything more to that subject? Is this really something that would help to bring companies to abide?
Yes. So clearly regulating for pollution prevention is a critical driver of behaviour change. There's an increasing movement within governments around the world to actually mandate and legislate disclosure of meaningful corporate water information. So an example is within the European Commission from next year, any publicly listed company that has more than 500 employees will be expected and mandated to include non-financial information in their financial reports. This is quite a significant change and opportunity for environmentalists, as well as it will be environmental, social, and governance information will become part of their mainstream reporting requirements. It's up to each member state to decide what data points will be included in each financial report, and we hope that these requirements will be standardized across the union. There's no guarantee, of course, that will happen, but the more that these reporting requirements can be mandated in a way that is meaningful not only to regulators, not only to governments, but importantly to the market, I think that will be an effective behavior change that we'll see.
Thank you. We have 2 short questions there up there.
My name is Maria Teresa Gutierrez from the International Labour Organization. Part of my request has been already response. I wanted to mention that next year is the World Water Year for Water and Jobs. So it is a good moment to highlight and to bring this issue to the thematic and the discussion, how we are going to make visible in the context that water can create more jobs, opportunities, and to develop this kind of initiatives, policies. Mm-hmm. So I would like to invite all the audience to bring or to leave this session with this in mind, that for the next year we have to highlight how, in what extent water can create the opportunities for a better employment creation, opportunities, but at the same time how jobs are related to water improvement and more accessible for all the people.
All right. Thank you very much. Very good suggestion.
In fact, there were more companies that reported opportunities than risks this year, and they see that it is a strategic opportunity for their business.
Thank you. Last question.
Thank you. Murray Beadler, I'm a consultant, and I had the fortunate opportunity to be able to collaborate with the team during the building of the European Water Stewardship Standard. I'm a water specialist of many years, and I must say the work that they've done and the standard that they have achieved with that particular EWS is very impressive in combination, also in concert with the AWS. One of the things that we have identified and seen is that the term stewardship is being applied in a number of different ways outside of the standard or outside of the AWS, the Alliance, and it's coming up in different areas. And when I think of the list of other initiatives that you run through during your presentation, which testify to good corporate responsibility in terms of water management, we're as a concern that there's a bit of dilution of what is really a responsible stewardship standard, and whether that's been addressed, because we have a feeling that the field is getting crowded and it's getting a little confusing for investors. Thanks.
Thank you, Murray. That's a great point. I'm on the board of the Alliance for Water Stewardship. The European Water Partnership are a great advocate of ours, and we work collaboratively to ensure that we reflect each other's ambitions and objectives, and they have opportunities to feed into our process and vice versa. And we hope that way that we are all singing from the same hymn sheet.
Thank you very much. Sorry, we have no time anymore. Thank you, Kate. For the last presentation on the last session in the last day of the conference.
How many minutes do I have? 2 minutes.
Sarantuya, if you could report on the academia and capacity development.
Yeah, well, I have a difficult task to summarize everything in very short time. Well, capacity development from an academia lens. So, well, I would like to start the key messages with a general statement that education and capacity building are essential to use the existing available scientific tools and technologies and for the uptake of the scientific knowledge by the society. But there are several challenges and obstacles in doing so, and so the scientific community among themselves in these academia sessions have debated a lot how the scientists and scientific community can make a role in this task. So the first challenge that was highlighted was the relevance of the science and the research in addressing water challenges to support the water sustainable development goals. So how to make the science and the research more relevant to addressing real problems and actually to meeting the water targets. So in that, one of the obstacles was identified that the academics focus on fundamental and pure research rather than on applied research, and this is because the academic and scientific career is driven by and promoted by the scientific excellence rather than by its impact. So the scientific excellence in the scientific community is measured by the number of peer-reviewed publications, which is not really the measure of its impact. So this actually also pinpointed to the challenge that the scientists are a little bit out of touch of the reality from the real problems. And so other obstacles were identified that there are no much research funds on addressing real problems or on applied research. For example, there were no research funds, so it's very difficult to obtain funds for research on water and sanitation in developing countries. And some scientific journals are not interested in publishing research on these topics. So the scientists are not really encouraged, or there are not so many incentives to do applied research. So this is actually one of the ways to solve this problem, overcome this obstacle, is that actually maybe the scientific community has to move towards a way of measuring the scientific excellence by its impact on the society, even though the impact will not be immediately visible. The impact will be in the long term, rather than by measuring it by the number of publications. The other main challenge was that how to bridge the science policy interface, and I think this has been mentioned by many panelists previously. So of course it is a big problem, and we have to face it, and of course this is because the scientists and policymakers, they don't talk to each other. So how to make the scientists talk to policymakers? First, of course, we have to change the mentality of the scientists, because it seems that academia is a very closed society. The researchers, they talk to each other, only to each other, to impress each other, how they are good in excelling in scientific research. So it's better to make them talk to others, to other stakeholders. And actually, there are some efforts that some scientists do that. So some researchers and scientists advise policymakers, but then they are not really well received by the scientific community. They are repelled by the scientific community, and they are labeled by politicized or political researchers. So this is also one way to change the mentality of the scientific community. The other challenge was how to build human capacities and technical skills. So this is the role of the next step. So there was a need that was stressed, that we need to create a mass of trained professionals, and we need to create a mass of knowledge. And for that, we need to train more and more people and train more water professionals. For that, it was highlighted that it's really important to develop a global water curriculum and make research a part of this education and capacity building programs, and so that actually we have to bridge the mismatch between scientific research and education and capacity building. It's not like that all capacity building programs are based on the existing best scientific knowledge and information. So also to make sure that the capacity building programs are sustainable, and in order to do that, we have to train more trainers, not only the professionals, but we have to train trainers. So with regard to building technical capacities, of course, it's very important to build the technical capacity, and the skills training was discussed, and there's an important point in many presentations. And of course, this was also linked to the career opportunities in the water sector. So the continuity of professional development, and now the best trained people don't always remain in the water sector. They move to the other sectors, and also this actually pinpoints to the question that how to make sure that the trained people or the skills are used in the best way in the water sector. The other challenge was the building capacities at the local level, because that's where there is knowledge gap, where there is capacity gap, where there is also data gap. There were several examples about this. So because especially in the WASH session, because WASH is a big problem in rural areas, and there are no capacities in the local communities to take and to use existing scientific tools and technologies. So the other main challenge that was highlighted was the role of science in making science-based and evidence-based decision. Of course, for that, we have to make sure that the scientists provide scientific information and knowledge to policymakers on all issues, and that can be done through knowledge transfer. So knowledge transfer to policymakers to other stakeholders, and that can be done through capacity building programs. So, of course, research and scientific advancements can only be used through capacity building programs and through transfer knowledge to other stakeholders of the society. And for that, it was highlighted that transfer knowledge not only to policymakers, not only to professionals, also to other involved stakeholders in local levels especially, and to the public as well. And well, in terms of the scientific research, it was mentioned previously in different panels about moving towards interdisciplinary research, because addressing water challenges requires an interdisciplinary research, because water as a resource itself, it touches upon on all segments of the society and all sectors of the economy. So we have to make sure that the research is not really focusing on one field, but also is more intersectoral, and we have to break the silo mentality of the academic sector. The other issue was that for that we also need to bring together researchers from different sectors to work on one specific project and to create interdisciplinary research programs, and also to include social sciences, because social sciences is important in the effective implementation of scientific tools and technologies. With regard to public awareness and communicating research outcomes, this was highlighted as an important issue. So there was an example that even though the science and the research can make a difference, it may not be immediately accepted by the society if you don't communicate the scientific results in the best way. And one example was that in Vietnam, through the technological and scientific improvements, they have made that the potable water is really of good quality in different cities, but people still boil water before using it because they are not used to have very safe water in the taps. So these were the main issues highlighted. There were some examples, but I will, in the sake of the times, I will not go through those examples, and some of them were mentioned. So I think with that I would close, and I hope I have been brief.
Thank you very much. I'm sure that all the cases and examples will come back in the conference report. Thank you. Any questions for the academia capacity development? I can allow two. One, two.
Thank you so much. My question is about academia and policy making, about water and sanitation as well. Would you please give me an example that how can we integrate our academia with the policy making process with the utilization of our youth, academia, and policy making? How we can integrate all these three components to achieve the SDGs within a time framework? Because I'm sorry to say, I have visited many universities as well. There is just one behavior is common, that we just educate the student and in research just complete thesis and put it in rack. That's finished. So I'm asking this: is it good that just conduct a research and put in rack and that's issue the degree, finish? So I just want how we can integrate our academia, youth, and policy making so that we can achieve SDGs within a time framework, because we are too much late even last decade about MDGs as well. Thank you so much.
Well, youth is a very important group of the society, and because they are our next generation, and because they are our next generation of professionals, next generation of policymakers, and next generation of scientists. And of course, we have to first train them, and whether they would be in the water sector or in other sectors, they have to have good knowledge about water issues. So, but how to bring together academia, youth, and policymaking? And I think this is maybe an issue that the the science policy interface has to take into account how to bring other stakeholders in this process. So with regard to water, I would like to cite two examples. UNESCO works together with World Water Council, creating on Youth Water Parliament. So, and this Youth Water Parliament has contributed to many UNESCO water scientific programs and meetings on water issues. So actually we have made sure that the voice of the youth is heard, not only by the policymakers, also by the scientists, so that the scientific programs or policymakers, they take into account the youth point of views. And also now, through our involvement in the World Water Forum, we are also facilitating the participation of the youth and Youth Water Parliament in the political process of the World Water Forum. And I think our colleagues from Korea maybe will also elaborate on that one, and to bring the voice of the youth in the different discussions in the World Water Forum, so that actually they can also play a role in this process.
Thank you. One more short question and a short answer, please.
Sorry, I have a slightly less pessimistic view of academia than Sarantuya, and I've been in the I've been a water researcher for many years, and I think I'm fairly socially aware. And the reason for this is we are academics, but we're also other stakeholders, because I'm a water consumer, and I'm a member of environmental NGOs. So we academics have a broader stake in the business than you might think. So I would be less pessimistic.
Thank you. Thank you for that comment. Okay, then there's one last question. Gentleman up there.
Okay, from my perception is that many of the training programs to create capacity, not in the academy, but from the academy, or from, in any case, from training technician, in order to give capacity to the person to the person in the institution that have to manage the water, they fail for too many reasons. First of all, because training is not a short-term program, but there is a strong difference between capacity and training somebody and giving follow-up. So in many of the international cooperation programs, I think that training is part of the project, but there is no follow-up of the application on this, and then having feedback from the application, and then following the transfer to the knowledge that was with the capacity building program directly in the field. And second is that capacity building. I mean, in many institutions you can train people, but then people change in the institution. So, or there is a sustainable system to update the capacity building, and for this a continuous system. If not, you can create, I mean, in many institutions, especially in developing countries, you can create capacity, but then the good trained people, they go to other places because, for example, it's quite typical in the public institution, the people, they go to the private sector because they paid better. So you create capacity, but then this capacity, they are not used to manage the natural resources, because the people that receive this capacity then go in another place. So I think that the time frame of capacity building is one of the main problems. It's not one-shot activity, but has to be considered in a different way.
Thank you very much for your contribution. I don't think there was really a question.
Yeah, so very briefly, there are two different points. One is about sustainability of capacity building, because training is part of the capacity building, but it's not training per se. It's not a capacity building in its broader sense. And of course, I think to make capacity building more sustainable, it's not only a question of training, but I think to make the training or capacity building a more participatory process, so that from the beginning of identifying capacity building needs, and to selecting the targeted group to whom to train capacity on what, and then how this capacity building will be used, in which context. I think that this whole process will make the capacity building more sustainable. With regard to the professionals, and I think there is Of course, it is important to make the career development in the water sector and then to make opportunities for the trained people to stay in the water sector. I think one of the important components is the training or capacity building after of water professionals. So the continued professional development, training of the professionals after they have graduated, so that they can also be updated on the new scientific knowledge and the information, and that can be used in their work, but also create opportunities for their career development.
Thank you. I think it's a kind of a natural process. Now, juniors, they are being trained, they become seniors, and then new juniors come in, they have to be trained again, of course. It's nothing unnatural about it. But of course, it would be good if you can retain those people, the trained people in the water sector.
Yeah, but also I think there is another interesting point, that the legacy maybe of the trained professionals, so that the trainees, like senior professionals, also can train the younger professionals, and then they can also pass their not only the knowledge but also know-how, the experience, and I think that's also important to have this legacy. Yeah.
Right. Thank you very much. Before we close, I would really like to go around the table again for just in 1 or 2 sentences your last comment, or what are you going to take home from this conference, of course, and also from this session. Alice.
Well, the key take-home message from capacity development point of view is investment comes before revenue. Investing in strengthening and capacitating civil society, particularly youth, so that they can capacitate local communities and build enabling environments for decentralized efforts to scale, pays off many times. And we know that this is not a new message, but we hope that in the SDG process and the financing for development process, there is the political will to allocate adequate budget for it this time. So the message is basically governments go for it. Not necessarily increase the budget, but to allocate resources differently with proper investment for capacity development. It should be an integral, invest sufficiently in capacitating the local actors should be part of a financing scheme for water. They will make a penny into a dollar.
Thank you. My last message is capacity for implementation is a key constraint. And also it's an enabler for success on water and other SDGs. Enormous challenge is in front of us, as well as opportunities coming out of SDG. Just if you take water sector alone, which used to be just water supply and sanitation, now has got 6 targets and 17 different goals. So governments will be basically, particularly in developing countries, will be challenged enormously. Therefore, it is critical that capacity development is given due attention, and governments are key in providing decision or making decision. They are enablers for capacity through providing policy, putting appropriate governance and institutional mechanisms, providing budget and resource for capacity development, setting up various forms of training and capacity development. Therefore, it's important that governments be supported in order to realize the capacity of their respective countries.
Of course. Just to reiterate what I said really earlier, given the right tools, accountability frameworks and incentives, business can deliver meaningful solutions at scale, not only to enhance their own capacity, but ultimately to ensure that they are playing their role in enhancing other key stakeholders' capacity also. Some of the tools already exist and they're already being implemented with varying degrees of success right around the world, and more are currently being developed. Increasing pressure from investors, peers and purchasers to effectively address corporate water risk and opportunities brings with it the confidence that business will be compelled to take meaningful action and play their role in contributing to the achievement of the SDGs.
Thank you. Well, the take-home messages, yeah. So first, encourage more interdisciplinary and applied research and make science and research more relevant to the reality, to real problems. Invest in capacity building in the local level where there is knowledge, information, and data gap. Build capacity not only in the water sector but also in other sectors on water issues, and also involve other stakeholders in capacity development. And the main take-home message is the education and capacity development is a key to sustainable development, and also it will contribute to reducing inequalities and poverty, in which UNESCO firmly believes. Thank you.
You got both microphones. I just came to pick it up. Thank you very much. Joachim will have the last reflections on what has been said here, and that would also lead seamlessly into the next wrap-up session, unless Josefina has something to add.
Oof, what's this? Thank you, Kees. It's going to be easy. I'm going to summarize this discussion in 3 points. The first thing we need to do is we need a confession. We, the water sector, we have a capacity development problem. That's a starting point. Second thing is that we have to realize, and we've understood here, that capacity development is much more than a one-off, short-term exercise trying to build skills and abilities of individuals. It's a long-term, even continuous process that involves institutions, that relates to companies, networks, and the broader enabling environment for sustainable development. Final point, capacity development is the engine, the driver, and the fuel for achieving the SDGs. Thank you very much. I think they're already on tape. Colleagues and friends, we're now going to move on. So thank you very much, Kees and panelists. I'm soon